Good morning, everybody. My name is Michael Cioni. It is NAB 2025, and I'm really excited and proud to be joined with some incredible colleagues and great creators and great supporters of the media and entertainment space. Specifically this morning, we're going to be talking about navigating the challenges of the cloud. One of the things that's really interesting about the cloud is as the pandemic hit, we started to migrate almost blindly to the cloud to solve all of our problems. And it was really critical so that we could collaborate when we were far apart. But what is changing now that 5 years on, we're starting to see that a lot of the cloud integrations and the cloud costs are catching up with us, and we didn't realize how much it's costing. And if you're like me and you pay for your own cloud, every 30 days, my Amex bill pops up on my phone when I'm sitting next to me, and I have this little heart palpitation as I realize I keep shooting, I keep adding files, and it keeps getting bigger and bigger. And the cloud might say, hey, what's another 20 bucks? What's another terabyte? What's another user? Sound familiar? And this is this change that's starting to happen. And I realize when I think about how much media I am going to personally shoot over the next 10 years, where am I going to put it? And the cloud just doesn't necessarily make financial sense. And so what I wanted to do is have a tough conversation, an important conversation about where we're going to store media, how we're going to utilize the cloud, how we can keep collaborating and not let the costs run away with us, so we just keep feeding the meter forever and ever and ever. And no one wants to get into the conversation of the scariest word, deletion, right? Nobody likes that deletion story. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And again, my name is Michael Cioni. I'll be moderating this, and I want to introduce some great colleagues really quickly as we can get into a good conversation. This is really a great different forms of perspectives that we've got here. So we'll start with David here. Tell us a little bit about you and what you're doing.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. My name is David Hoffman. I am the Business Development Manager for the Americas at Blackmagic Design. We make a full spectrum tool set for creative storytellers, from cameras all the way to delivery and storage. So that's critical to the conversation today.
I am Brittany Janay. I'm a solo entrepreneur, a DP, and filmmaker editor. So a lot of my perspective is just pretty much going to come from how I handle it as an individual, dealing with kind of my own business and what that looks like.
My name's Clyde Bessey. I'm the creative director and founder of a production company called Origin Point, and we've been working on and off with the cloud for the past 6 years now. Learning a lot and slowly going from being more remote to a little bit more localized, so excited to talk about that today.
I'm Mike Cavanaugh, founder and president of KeyCode Media, a 24-year-old system integrator, 10 offices across the United States. We've been very involved in originally selling on-prem, which turned into cloud and then hybrid. And so we've done a lot around the economics, working with our clients to sort of understand what the cost structure is for investments on what pathway they take.
So you're seeing right here a really good set of variations here, from manufacturing, integrations, users, from the small, medium, and large spaces. So this is really good. So Mike, I want to actually start with you here. Cloud platforms have really promised a lot of flexibility and delivered that, to be truly honest. But are they really gaining us a lot of freedom, or are you finding with your experiences and customers that we're trading one set of problems for another?
Absolutely. The real aspect of it, I think, was driven, 2019, everybody started to look at the cloud-based big aggregator solutions, and top financial C-suite people looked and they moved their ERPs, their marketing, SharePoint, their storage, and that all made a huge amount of sense, including from my company. Then they came back and said, we have a cloud initiative for our entire organization, and we're going to move our media department into the cloud. And they started to slowly move it into different solutions like LucidLink. And then that's when the dollar figures started ticking on the meter. So we'll maybe talk about that in a little, but that's the analysis. But a real quick one is, if you have 100 terabytes of, say, LucidLink, which is by far the leader in cloud-based editorial, and they have an amazing technology where you can spin up and be cutting within minutes. The downside is, say, okay, we're now using it and we're full in, and we have 100 terabytes in the cloud. Your yearly cost for usage will be $96,000. Flip that around, you can buy a 384 terabyte SAN from a Facilis SNS and multiple other companies for the mid-70s. And then you're just paying for power, internet connection, and you're actually getting more tools with your investment where you could buy a system once a year and be less than your cloud costs.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing. From the pure economic sense, that should really resonate. Clyde and then Brittany, tell us how you're using cloud as a hybrid solution, where it's serving you and where it's become a pain point in describing your workflow. We'll start with you, Clyde.
Yeah, absolutely. So after the pandemic hit, we jumped headfirst into using virtual machines, using cloud-based workflows. And I've got the fastest internet I think you can get in Orange County, 5 gig to move up there, but it slowly started to become a bottleneck just to get it into the systems for us to start working with it. So after that point, we essentially built our own server with a network of workstations connected to it where we remotely bring in our workforce, we bring in our editors, we bring in our creators. And that single source of truth of data has really allowed us to find more flexibility in our tools. But the biggest limitation, like you said, is that bottleneck of getting things up there. And so I'm here to learn and find out new ways where we can kind of conquer that hill together.
For me, I'm an editor, so half of my workflow is being able to upload, as well as I'm a shooter, so a lot of that is being able to upload a mass amount of footage that I shoot. And so that's where like the cloud comes in, and then just saving that footage. Sometimes it's raw files, so I needed like a bigger amount of space. But as far as issues, it's going to be pricing, because I am solo, so I'm pretty much kind of my own business when it comes to that. And what I've noticed is when I'm working with multiple teams, and there's a lot of times where I have so many clients, the more teams that I'm adding and the more clients I'm adding, the more it's going to cost me. So that's a big thing, pretty much with that. The biggest is going to be like price, and then just like backup. Like most times as an editor, I'm the one that's backing up. I'm the one that has all the footage. So what does that look like with my clients for future?
And just so that we get a perfect picture of it, tell us exactly the tools that you're using to make this work with your workflow for your clients.
Yeah, so the main tool that I use is Frame.io. I think is pretty much a lot of clients that I work with know about that world. And so a lot of times it's dealing with that, but even the process of like when I'm having to work with them during the shooting and everything, it's great for, but when it comes to just footage, a lot of them don't necessarily know how to maneuver around it. And then for a year, I try to keep the footage, like I said, as an editor. And so if I'm having multiple clients, that's a lot of footage that I have to keep and then kind of maintain. But Frame.io is like my main program.
Well, one of the things I really like and actually really respect about what Blackmagic's done, they're not the only company that does this, but a lot of companies will focus exclusively on cloud solutions, and then other companies will focus exclusively on on-prem solutions. What I noticed, and while Blackmagic we're acknowledging here, they're not the only ones, but what I think Blackmagic has done really well is a really calculated, intentional hybrid solution. So David, tell us a little bit about how you guys are celebrating and getting customers to utilize both cloud and on-prem to find people where they are.
Yeah, so in 2019, as kind of similar to Clyde's experience there, we started to look at what that was emerging workflows and said, how was that going to impact us? Obviously, as a content creator company, we make tools that are generating this media. We had a lot of experience looking at, okay, well, that's going to be super expensive if we're just sitting on a high-performant cloud-based storage. So we looked at it more from immediately that this was going to be a hybrid situation. So we wanted to look at the cloud as a force multiplier and ability to bring people into the workflow and out of the workflow, but that media itself should not be beholden to a ticking time bomb, essentially, of cost. So we started building the tools, we call it Cloud Store, which is our hardware appliances that we then would put on-prem that would allow for you to use those as essentially cloud cache. So you're pulling it down, you're working locally, but you're collaborating with all of the people with all the tools that we're using. So we use the cloud as effectively as possible to get multiple people working on the workflow. But where we have the storage locally, that's more cost-effective and performant. Just in our newest announcements, we announced a 17K camera, which obviously going to be generating a metric ton of storage. But then along with that, we announced a cloud dock that will allow you to put in just low-cost hard drives, right? High-density hard drives to then pull your media back for that archiving, right? So again, it's a chance of having it near to you and not worrying about what the connectivity is going to be, even though you can find low cost, deep archiving solutions, this is going to be something that you own. That's always been one of our primary concerns, is like, you own the media, you should have it close to you, you should be able to do what you want with it when you want. And that's always been our philosophy.
I want to come back to that, David, because what's really cool about what you just described gave me an idea. See, when we're talking about cloud storage, we are effectively renting it, right? There's a very few exceptions, but you can't really buy cloud storage. So it's a perpetual renting experience. But it feels cheap at first because you could just rent a little bit at a time. What you're describing here is a larger upfront cost, but it lasts longer. It's sort of what Mike was pointing out as well. David, tell us, how are the users responding to the upfront cost? Do they understand that, and do they make that investment, or is it hard to convince them of doing it that way?
No, not at all. I think everyone kind of sees the value of it when they start working with a collaborative team. If it's geolocated, like, hey, I've got people in LA and New York, London working on a project simultaneously. We're using the cloud to synchronize, and that makes sense for that cost. And it's more, of an OPEX expense based on the project itself. And then you basically pull everything back down and you hold it terrestrially, and then it has available to you at your desire to work with it. So that's okay, great. Now we've got a CAPEX expense on where I've invested in my storage, but I can bring it back out and use it with people. But I own it, right? I have control of it.
I think that's important to understand that OPEX, CAPEX relationship. Mike, in your world, a lot of the storage might come for a specific price, but the users are this additional thing. When you buy a SAN, it doesn't matter how many users you have. For the most part, they don't necessarily charge that way. You can connect the drive to as many people as you want. In a cloud, it doesn't necessarily work that way. So how are your customers figuring out, how do you help them figure out the usage base and how many seats you need on-prem versus cloud storage? Is that a challenge, or is it something you have to calculate for them?
That's not the complicated part, because it's relatively low key, like $10 a month, which is less than, a fraction of an hour of what they're being paid on a salary level. But where we've really seen how that cloud expansion looks is, cloud is great to get started for small and really charge everything across the project. But as Brittany said, the clients want to maintain the media in the cloud, and then you start having to thinking about 3-2-1, content protection levels. And I look at really the best place for the cloud is burstable for features that you can't justify to buy today. For example, Telestream has a workflow that you can be all cloud, you can be on-prem, or most importantly, hybrid, where you can get a license for a function that you need, burstable for one particular job, and when that job's over, stop paying for that license. So you're bouncing parts of your workflow through the cloud. So I try to look at the cloud as sort of how do you burst up and burst back down, where it's not a long-term project, because once it becomes a long-term thing, you have to make that strategic decision. Am I going to pay 3x for what I could do on-prem?
And what do the customers end up deciding when it comes to that deletion question or keeping it on-prem? What is your best advice on how to navigate that?
There's a vendor called Storage DNA up there that can give you a dashboard, allow you to see all of your content, and create synchronization strategies. So not just repatriate, but you may look at, I'm in Elusive Link, but I'm paying $80 a terabyte, and I have Backblaze or Wasabi or Seagate, and they're sub $10 a terabyte, but it's not online. It's more like what we call nearline, is creating workflows that allow you to have synchronization between those platforms to lower your cost and or to synchronize on-prem to have an even lower base cost.
Clyde, with your customers and your collaborators, how are you best managing the usage? Because you don't use one tool. None of us use one tool to do it all. How do you factor into the bidding process? And when you're figuring out how to bid on a job, you probably have to include those services as part of the process. And a lot of creators and production companies have to work all that in. Do you factor that all in up front, or do you break it out by the job? Or do you pass on the cost of the tools you need back to the customer?
That's a tough question, and it's constantly evolving, as these numbers and pricing are changing and the different offerings from these different brands that we work with. But ultimately, we always do try to pass that on to our clients in some form or another, but in terms of storage, whether it's cloud storage or on-prem storage, that's something that we want to make sure is accounted for, and our ability to access things, Working on the files with a shared workstation, that's one thing. Getting it into frame for your clients to be able to view and have collaboration that way, a total other thing. And I don't know, if you're like me, I have a lot of time spent copying, transferring, uploading, and these bottlenecks stopping us from working and being creative and doing what we need to do, which is why I love hearing about flexibility from these systems and what Blackmagic is doing to be able to make it easier for us to create.
Brittany, similar to that, when you told me earlier that there are tools like Dropbox that can serve you in some capacities, but not in all capacities. You have to kind of go back and forth. Give us a little picture of like what are the main tools that you're using outside of Frame. Take us through kind of a traditional workflow that might like help us understand which tools are the ones serving you and where you might find the biggest gap in that.
So the workflow for me, it's a couple. So as an editor, once I kind of get the footage, I have a NAS at home. So I pretty much...
Which one is it? We want to know.
It actually, it's a friend who made the NAS from scratch for me, just so I can have more... That's a whole nother conversation.
We don't have that friend.
But to have more space, right? So I think get up to like 50 terabytes with, just individual externals. But so I pretty much use that as my backup as well, like my at-home backup. Because the footage is so large, and I try not to put any kind of thing on my computer. So that's pretty much where most of my footage is. But I travel a lot for work. And so with that, I need cloud. That's where cloud storage comes into play, and being able to access that if I'm out the country, and what does that look like when I have to upload to my clients. And that's where Frame.io comes in. I've tried multiple, I've tried the Dropbox, I've tried things like that, and it just doesn't work workflow-wise. It's very clunky and it's very inconsistent. And so for me, having a consistent workflow, being able to access from afar, and then just being able to have that collaboration within the system with my clients. So I was talking to a lot of people about like, what does a presentation look like to where I can have that? What does chatting on these apps, what does those look like to where I can kind of talk to my clients? And it just being more than just cloud storage, but from an editor and DP perspective, how can I have a full on like workflow in these?
I love that because again, like what I really feel we're accomplishing here is a really good wide range of ways to touch on how to solve this problem, but everyone has the same problem, right? They're just at different scales. So kind of the same question to David and then to Mike, but David, I would like you to give us a little pitch on like, if you were starting out with a hybrid workflow, what would be your recommendation and sort of your tools that would be a really great, let's call it a starter kit. And then Mike, what would you do if you had a team of like 50 or more, what that starter kit would look like? So more of like a team of 10 or fewer starter kit versus 100 and above starter kit. I'd love to like see what comes out initially you think would be able to, people could like kind of leverage and research.
So I'll talk, specifically about Blackmagic tool sets, and we kind of address all of that across the board. So we have a cloud-based workflow and user management system. So if you log on to Blackmagic Cloud, you can then go in and you can rent licenses per use. It's not a subscription. It's, basically we look at it like a utility, right? So you own the light bulb, you screw it in, you're always going to own the light bulb. So you own Resolve, but when you need to use that with other people, you turn the power on, you pay for the light to go to the light bulb, you turn it off, you're not using it anymore. So this allows you to have elasticity in your workflow. You can bring in people for those burst efforts that you need. And then you can also purchase storage that is Blackmagic storage, it's on cloud storage, or you can use any other service you want, but we do provide that service, are pretty cost effective. So as you're setting yourself up, immediately what you're doing is saying, okay, I want to have storage, I want to have user expandability, so as I bring people in, I'm going to allow them to have Resolve licenses, and I don't have to go purchase all that. It's all being managed in the cloud pretty cost effectively right now. Then if you're going to collaborate and work remotely, as Brittany's been talking about, you can get a cloud-based database for Resolve. This allows anyone from a terrestrial unit or even a virtual machine instance of Resolve to work collaboratively. So now you can, as you're on together, because of how Resolve is built, I can work as an editor and I say, hey, I need to have a color grade on this shot. My colorist logs in, says, okay, I've got notes on that, I'm working on it. I can see when they're in the system, they're finished. I can see an update to my edit, a visual effect shot, whatever. So that's $5 a month to have that database. All the media then is, wherever you want to store it. And then the last part of that conversation is our cloud stores are the terrestrial component of the hybrid. And that starts with a $300 product called the Cloud Pod, which allows you to plug in any device on the USB-C connection. So if you have a back-end NAS that you've built on your own, or you have just a USB drives, what it's doing is it's making it available and visible to the overall workflow. So now I say, okay, I want to have the proxies being synchronized between other locations. If anybody else has a cloud pod and they're part of the project, they can be seen and say, okay, I'm going to copy proxies to this user, or I want OFCs to go to this other user, so it's going to cost me a little bit more for the, for the round trip synchronization. And then when I'm done with the project, I pull it all down on our drive base, or just a HDD, just a hard drive, spinning hard drives. I can get a massive storage for very little, and I can run down to the local Best Buy and continue to augment that. So now I've archived that stuff and it's available directly to me, and I can ship, and if I want to sneakernet and stuff. So from that perspective, now we're working in that sweet spot of what we see from Blackmagic's perspective of being the independent film producers, right? We've always empowered that group. It's a 5 to 10 person working team that is not necessarily all co-located now. They're all geographically diffused. And this gives you the ability to continuously work. There's also a couple other tools in there for review and annotation and collaboration. So I can publish out my timeline and have people asynchronously coming in and say, oh, there's the clip or there's the timeline. I'm going to look at that. I'm going to drop in notes. When the editor picks it back up, they're going to see all those markers and notes. They don't have to be on at the same time. So you've given a full range of tools there for that collaboration and creativity, along with the hardware component of it. The upgrade path from there is very obvious. We have our own then going from 8 to 16, 24, 48, up to 320 terabytes of on-prem storage that's now all synchronized as cloud storage, and then you can scale up your cloud-based storage as needed, petabytes if you want to, and you can scale it up. Hey, I want to have a petabyte of storage for the next month. I'm done with that. I pulled the media back down, scale that back down. My costs are associated specifically to the project. I can get user licenses specifically to the project, and I pour more into the OPEX and less on the CAPEX.
What I really like about what you just described that's kind of unique to Blackmagic, the other editing systems like Media Composer and Final Cut and Premiere, they're not as invested in the actual storage workflow. Media Composer to a degree, but I would say it's a little more restrictive on its integrations. And so what I like about Blackmagic Cloud and the on-prem storage is that it's actually very flexible, and Resolve lives at the center of this thing, which makes it convenient, and that's an easy app to get. Similar question again. What would you say is a good way to get invested and started into a larger pool when you got a lot of collaborators, big groups? What's your best advice if someone comes to you and say, I got 25 editors, I'm going to need 100 seats? What is the best way that you give advice to people to start?
I start with how many shows have you sold? And if they say 3, there is no economic ramification whatsoever that they can buy on-prem. And traditionally what Hollywood's done with Hollywood production companies, they are effectively a startup, and they are living and dying for how long they produce shows based on what the studio contract is. So they've traditionally rented Avid systems from third parties like a Hula Post or Christie's Editorial, and they'll bring in the Nexus, the Media Composer, and rent everything. And when the show's over, poof, it disappears. That's pretty much what the cloud is like now. You're renting everything. And I would talk with people about a hybrid sort of a hedge your bet, like we should have all done a week ago Monday in the stock market, is putting down, starting in the cloud as you're ramping up, but putting in tools that allow for synchronization back on-prem so that you can start to reduce some of your higher resolution imagery, have that on-prem as compared to in the cloud, which takes up a heck of a lot less storage. Build some synchronization engines to synchronize back to the director or the head editor on-prem, and then start looking at the production and start looking at when is that cost expense level and what's the predictability of selling that show. But we had an example, a very large social media influencer that ended up renting, bouncing some of the stuff off cloud, and all of a sudden they realized we have 99 cameras, we know how to play full camera footage online all time for all the editors, and there's nothing out there to rent, and the cloud can't deliver it. So they bought a 2 petabyte SSD to get their show delivered for Amazon.
Wow. And I know the shows you do, that's just like a Tuesday for you because you're doing shows like that all the time and servicing that. Would you say that the shows that you're servicing tend to follow the same trends, or is there a new trend that's emerging or some trends that are dying in terms of their storage and collaboration habits?
Well, I think the bigger issues is how they're integrating together the AI. So for example, on a cloud production, you could have Avid, Media Composer, and I think now Blackmagic. And there's a company called Quickture that you can send up an MP3 to the cloud. You have an instance at $500 a month, and you effectively now within your panel for Adobe or Avid can say, I want this 200 hour of interview that's not in the cloud, the footage is on-prem. I want to see the speakers, I want so-and-so to talk about this, I want this person to talk about that, and it literally creates you a rough cut. So you're creating a hybrid workflow leveraging compute that you will never put on-prem and for a very inexpensive price and make you overly more productive.
Just so everyone caught that product is called Quickture. Quickture. It's amazing. It really is a little time machine for editors to start getting to that first cut. You get to the first cut right away. And while $500 a month for some people sounds like a steal, and other people it sounds like it's stealing, I really think it's worth its weight in gold. I really stand by that product. Clyde and Brittany. So Clyde, small production company, Brittany, independent creator. Making the dollars and cents work and being really efficient is critical to success in sustaining your stories and your kind of brands and things like that. What is some of the advice that you would give people that are trying to build leaner, smarter workflows so you don't get caught up in costs and processes? Because we can read the websites, we can see the white papers on what's the best practices, but then you put it in your own practice. You're like, well, we're going to change this and we're going to add this and delete this. So giving advice on remote workflows and hybrid workflows and distributed teams, just based on your production company, what are some of the best advice you can give to people that want to be leaner and tighter, but also keep achieving? Origin Point makes ultra high quality stuff. I mean, Clyde stuff, I mean, the guy himself, he's his own chip. So it's amazing when you see the shots he can get with a ready rig. But tell us some of these advice you might have for kind of making things lean and mean.
Absolutely. I mean, for us, it was all about finding a solution that works best for our team, for our unique needs. And that's what I'd encourage for everyone, is to find out what works best for your team and what your team wants. Like, I don't know a VFX guy who doesn't work on crazy hours, who night is just going to be a night owl and he's going to want to work at this time and a project's going to start and it needs to be turned around tomorrow, and you want to have tools that'll allow that to happen. Utilizing the cloud, I could be accessing an 8K workstation from my laptop in my kitchen or on a plane or wherever you're traveling to, and being able to capitalize on all the strength of this hardware and this software wherever you're at, just through having a decent internet connection, right? That's the dream. Having that single source of truth, right? And life and with our data would be the goal, but that's the heaviest question, is where does the data go? Do I have to pack 200 terabytes through a small upload hole up into the cloud before we can actually start working with it? Or is there another solution where we can actually start making it happen and working on our footage right now?
Push the cat through the mouse hole.
Yeah, I call that sucking a golf ball through a garden hose. We all have an analogy. It's hard. But if you had to give, Brittany, if you had to give some advice, the sort of standalone creator, small teams, what are some of the startup advice? Because a lot of people are setting up production companies. In fact, I learned some data at the end of 2024 that said the average production company is a team fewer than 20. That's the average. And actually, I think the number was saying that 70%. It was like the majority of production companies are fewer than 20. I think sometimes in our head, we see these movie studios where there's like, acres and acres of people. And we have to remember they're the minority, because a lot of times the studios are hiring production companies of 15 or 20 people to actually produce the content. And I think sometimes we forget that. So, Brittany, when people are in smaller teams or do-it-yourself creators, what is some startup advice for people that want to get into this?
Honestly, I feel like tangibly, one of them is, like he said earlier, really bringing it back to the client. So I'm not footing everything myself as a production company, but really having them understand that each project, this is a part of the workflow now. So having cloud storage is also a part of the workflow. Most times as a DP, backups are necessary, right? So that's a good conversation to have up front. And I think that's a tangible thing that can be added. And that would be the biggest thing as far as when it comes to price. Everything else, really, I think I'm still trying to figure out what that looks like as far as cloud storage. But I think timelines are important too. Like he said earlier, like how long are we going to have this up, and making sure that that's known as well. Like you get 3 months of this online cloud storage before it does have to be, I guess, deleted. One thing I do that I see on Frame is you have the option to archive, right? So like if you don't want to fully delete, then you do have the option to place it somewhere to where it's not within, you know, what's
a little cheaper.
Exactly, it's a little cheaper. And so I think things like that will kind of help of creating a timeline with your client and having them understand this is a part of a workflow that you should have. So then it becomes like a normal thing. But then also these are the timelines. I can't keep this for 3 years. Like there has to be some kind of like in time for that. So.
Well, you had your very generous friend build you a NAS. I don't have that friend. But when you get past that contract expiration, this is not my media, do you actually delete it? What do you do?
Okay, so for me, if it's something that I really, really want to keep, I do put it on my NAS. But a lot of times, because I'm also an editor, I'll just try to either pick certain clips or I'll try to create a string out, which then if I need to go back and post to cut up, I can do that as well. So I'm not having like a lot of like a 25 gigabyte. And like I shoot on Blackmagic, and you know those files can be huge. I shoot on Sony sometimes, and those files can be huge. So you're getting like 100 gig for one file. So I usually try to go through and be really selective on that. I'll try to put it on my NAS. But even with me, after 2 years, I'm like, I don't use this enough for my portfolio. I gotta figure out, you know, I gotta kind of archive and delete it.
Well, I'll tell you a trick that I always do, and it was like, I used to own a post-production company called Light Iron, and I used to come to NAB and just preach about the highest quality content you can create and hold and maintain forever. And I'm totally changed. I'm totally now re-shifting to good enough is good enough. And I used to, that sounds, I mean, it's almost like, scary to say, but I used to really believe it had to be uncompressed, it had to be 12 bits or higher, it had to be DCI 4K and all these things. I don't believe that anymore. I don't believe that because consumer tastes are changing, and the projection infrastructure world is starting to decay. And now some of the qualitative things we used to fight for aren't actually visible at all. I know a lot of people might disagree with that. That's fine. But I don't believe we can see the last mile. And so fighting for the last mile sometimes might not be necessary for everyone. But what I've been doing recently that I really love, I actually use Resolve when I'm finished with my projects. And one of the things, you could do this with other products, but Resolve makes it really easy. I will put in my final project, whatever resolution it is, and I will do a 10 megabit main 10 HEVC output of it. And the Resolve main 10 dual pass, you could do a dual pass at main 10, which is a 10-bit sampling at 10 megabits, because you can set 10,000 kilobytes. You might want to switch that to megabytes. I don't know, but we can do math. And then that becomes my archive forever, because I really only now have like a 3 or 4 or 5 gig file, and I can pretty much store that, and the cost of it is a rounding error. And if I really want to keep some of the original material, I'll do the same thing at 10 megabits. And if it's already color corrected, which means it's gamma corrected and the dynamic range has been limited to like 8 or 9 stops, right? If we shoot with these 15 stop cameras, it's hard to compress that in an HEVC in a log format. But once it becomes gamma corrected and the dynamic range is constricted, it's actually really easy for compression to hide itself. It becomes very difficult to see. And that's a trick that I do to get my archives to be really tiny, and then I really don't feel I'm in that situation. David, kind of on the same thing here, we are seeing like the future is really starting to kind of empower filmmakers. We want to make sure that happens. So my question is, Mike, you wanted to say something. I apologize. Jump in.
I'm just going to say Michael was the keynote speaker at the Hollywood Post Alliance, and type in his name, Hollywood Post Alliance keynote, 27-minute on disruption of how Hollywood is working. And what he didn't know is after the speaker, heads of post-production and studios all came to me and said, I don't know why we have these rules. Listening to Michael, we're going to rethink our entire strategy.
All right.
Autographs after the show.
That's right. Well, that is really interesting because like I mentioned a second ago, I really believed in achieving the best of the best of the best. And following those rules actually came out of a good place because we needed to follow rules, especially when it's the Wild West. And now I believe we're all so good at what we do, and the technology has gotten so tolerant of our needs that some of these rules have become a little antiquated. So yeah, and that's why I love one of my mentors, Leon Silverman, talks about workflows as snowflakes because they're all individual workflows. Everybody has a snowflake workflow. That used to mean it was chaos. Now snowflake workflows, you could just shove anything through Final Cut or Resolve. You just put anything in a timeline, it'll chew it up, it'll work, and we're kind of lucky that we can do that. So David, and I want to go through everybody here. If we imagine a future that is empowering the next generation of filmmakers, what does that mean in terms of an infrastructure 3 to 5 years? I want you to take a guess based on what you know now. What about 3 to 5 years from now in the infrastructure for serving the filmmaking community?
I think, as we talked earlier about the tools that are making it easier to find the content, to filter the content and present it to the creator so that they can do the creative work quicker and not the mundane work. That's really I think the dream of AI, right? That's really the process of AI. I think that's going to be much more powerful for us as we use that tool, not as a content creator, but a content manager, right? Those tools are going through and they're saying, hey, I can do a quick analysis. I can find the level of quality you're looking for. I can do analysis of object face or action recognition, and I can pull together all the things. So you basically have a ability to get to creativity quicker. That limits the amount of time that you are generating options. And then you may not use them all, right? You're going to end up with that one sweet spot earlier, and the customer is going to be happy and delivered, and you'll be fine. So I think the future is really in the AI tools that are allowing us to cut through the content chaos. The other is it's going to go and say, well, look, we have massive shots here. We can quickly process that out and find the ones that work, and then compress out or store the ones that we don't, or just do away with them altogether, because we know that we made the selection intelligently that gave us the best option. We don't have to have the FOMO, right? Like, that shot could have been the one, right? Like I gotta back and find that on the hard drive, or I put it on, Glacier storage. I got to pull that forward, and then you're worrying about the technology and not the creativity at that point.
Brittany, 3 to 5 years. What needs to happen? What do you want in your world, or people that do what you do?
I agree, the AI tools, and we're seeing it happen now. There was a lot announced even this year of like tagging and transcription and being able to like all the metadata, like the apps are doing it now. And so that's great. Like he said, I forget what I'm shooting. I got to find that one shot out of thousands of clips that we shot. So I think that's going to be the biggest thing. And then another thing is, I would say, making it more accessible, like hands-on, like on my phone. How can I access my files from my NAS at home? Like if I'm out the country, and I still need to do an edit, is there proxies I can take to edit this on my phone, even though my footage is somewhere else? And what does that look like, that connection? So just making it easy overall would just be super ideal for me.
I want to ask you, Brittany, give us a number of percentage. How much editing do you do on your phone versus on your desktop?
Honestly, maybe like 5% on my phone, only because I travel so much that a lot of times either I'm bringing multiple external hard drives because I have to put whatever is on my NAS on these hard drives, or I just wait till I get home. Because a lot of times right now, these apps, even though, you have your Adobe Rush and all of these smaller apps, they're not as robust as the ones that you'll do on the actual computer. And so it's really hard to be able to kind of like do that kind of edit. But then also I can't access certain files that I need to access. So even like certain effects or transitions, I have to like upload them on, a cloud to try to download. So it's just like the workflow isn't as conducive for me.
Because a lot of editors, if you say you want to edit on phone, they want to like throw up in their mouth, right?
Yeah.
But you're saying access is the problem, not the device.
Yes, access. Being able to access all of my footage, access all of my assets that I need? What does that look like? Because even you're thinking about, I'm already putting all the footage on the cloud. So now I also have to put all the assets on there as well. So I need every single thing for this project to be on the cloud. So sometimes that can be, a lot. And a lot of times you might, if you haven't transcoded or anything, you might forget something. You're like, now I gotta wait because so being able to access the original location of where everything is, wherever I'm at on my iPad or whatever that looks like, will be amazing.
I want to point out, because when we're talking 3 to 5 years, the idea of editing on your phone on a mobile device is only going to become more normal, folks. As weird and scary as that sounds, mobile access to the assets is going to be key, and that's going to be a big deal. Clyde, 3 to 5 years, what do you want? What do we got to do?
3 to 5 years, I would say flexibility and, like you said, accessibility. I would love to be able to offload all of our footage from our shoot into one place, not have to transcode and duplicate it to multiple different cloud places to be able to access that for our team. If we could have one place, I know it's a wish list, fusing all of these things together into a place where clients can come in and editors can come in and access these files and truly have that single source of truth for everyone to access, I think is kind of what we're working towards. It's kind of what we want to get to. And in terms of accessibility on the phones, you can't really tell if something was edited on a phone or if it was edited on a computer. How does it make you feel? Is it good content? That's what we really care about. So people like us, we want to be able to create wherever we want, everything, everywhere, all at once. Is that too much to ask for us to be able to create like that?
It shouldn't be, but on that note, it's really, really critical that people also understand that repetition and making as much content as you can is also a key part of this, because the amount of deliverables is going to go up, and the amount of time to do it is going to come down, and the people that are good at that actually propel themselves further along. And that's sometimes people say, well, that means the quality is going to be trade-off. Well, if you have a good workflow, maybe not necessarily. Mike, 3 to 5 years.
3 to 5 years, you will come up with an idea. You will connect the node to your head. You'll translate that data to the phone. The phone will create all your shot lists. You'll be capturing in 20K. You will be able to assign projects to other people with other phones. They will be able to capture what you want, upload it, proxy to a cloud, be able to communicate real time on what's happening, be able to add any AI footage that you need to fill it in, from backdrops to B-roll to just cloning your own self, and then creating multi-language, multi-distribution in multi-formats.
Now, at first I thought you were joking, so tell us how much of that you're serious, and so tell us how you think that practically can start to take.
I think it's just a matter, the phones are capturing better and better quality, but the reality, and I'm really not joking, I think in 5 years, outside of the node to the brain, that you'll be able to upload your script, it will automatically frame to your production schedule, you'll be able to start doing that, collaborating, filling in the blanks, having AI fill in parts of it with your actors if you have consent for that, adding voiceover, adding regionalization for language. And I truly think that it will be ubiquitous for the filmmaker in 5 years, just because AI is moving so fast that it will be able to do that.
Those 3 tools exist in Resolve now. Like what you're talking about is not uncommon. So in the AI tools that we have in Resolve, or in our neural engine and how it processes things, so you bring in a documentary that's an unscripted thing, it'll generate the script, then I can have a translation on the script, then I can have a cut. And then we can also do, when we're doing dialogue, if I'm doing a localization, I will adjust the edit based on how a word might translate and the time on the waveform to slow or speed up the footage. We also have a boring filter, so you put that on there and say, hey, how it goes through my entire timeline and looks for elongated shots and says, hey, by the way, 99% of your shots are 5-second cuts, and then you have this 30-second one in here. I think that's probably not in line with what you were doing. So those kind of tools are Mike's probably not too far off. Like, these are also things that are coming along, and the idea of going through and understanding where my footage is. But generative AI, now that's a whole different level, right? Okay, I need a bunch of backfill. Well, these were storyboards back in the day, right? We had animatics, hey, well, this is what I'm zooming in on a still image. This is what this is going to look like. Well, we can generate that in a pretty near photo quality and say, okay, well, that's going to hold there for me, so my creative team can continue creating, and then we'll backfill on that stuff and not just have a visual effects shot here, kind of card.
Well, what I hear from that, and think about how to wrap this up here, is that the value comes from listening to each other and listening to the different workflows. To the creators, whether it's big, medium, or small, The workflows are being discussed here, the hybrid workflows. Think about a little bit out of the box and explore those hybrid workflows. Going everything into the cloud, probably not going to solve all the problems, might create more. And then to the manufacturers, what was described here is also what people actually want. And the manufacturers that listen to what our real pain points are the ones that are going to propel further along. The ones that try to feed us, this is the workflow we've designed for you, are the ones that are going to suffer a little bit, and it's not going to necessarily be adopted. And so that's why I think people always forget storytellers have power simply by using and speaking and showing what we actually want. And I actually think NAB is a place where the manufacturers that come here are willing to listen. This is a room where people come palms up, give me something to carry, I want to help. And I really love that about that. So I want to thank our panel for being here this morning and discussing such a great subject and such a great amount of different perspectives. Thank you all for joining here in person, you online. Have a great rest of your week and a great show, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.